Listen,
I'm Steve Young. You're watching the Letterman podcast.
I was getting that ahead of
Welcome once again to the Letterman podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. Ben Zelevansky is our guest today. Ben we go through a whole bunch of his time in New York, working for some of the greatest shows he grew up on. He grew up on David Letterman. He grew up on Conan O'Brien. He grew up on Saturday Night Live. You know what? Ended up doing work for all three shows. Pretty crazy, pretty cool. Grew up, his mom would tape Late Night with David Letterman every night and play it the next morning, and that was the tradition that he had in his house, and just absolutely worshipped these shows. Got a chance to work on the shows first as an intern, and then he came and became the Stupid Pet Trick coordinator. And so we have a lot of fun talking about that. He ended up meeting his wife, another intern on the show, and just it's really cool to catch up with Ben, and after all these years to feel the impact that show, those people had on him in his life, and how they affected the trajectory of where he ended up going. The gratefulness, you can just feel it from him. And as you may or may not know, I'm a fan of gratefulness. I'm really, really excited to present this episode with Ben Zelevansky today. We have one sponsor only at the Letterman podcast. That is hello-deli.com. Go to hello-deli.com for all of your Late Show with David Letterman merchandise needs, curated by the hero, the man, the myth, the legend, Rupert G. himself. We hope that you enjoy our conversation with Ben today. Ben, I'm so grateful you've taken time to be here today. I want to know how the best way to address you is. I mean, I know you're a creative, but like actor, writer, and all sorts of different things that you do in the creative direction. What do you call yourself? Racketeer? Yes, absolutely. Or racketeer.
Man about town.
Racketeer, maybe.
Or rocketeer. That's fun.
Oh, this is going to be
great.
Be
licensed for that. That's too much. I never got into that. No, I don't know. Mostly what I do now is writing and acting and a little bit of odds and ends video production stuff. But that's the main stuff now. I mean, I was always interested in film and television. That's what I went to school for. That's how I ended up at Late Show. And so rather than, at the time and the focus coming out of school was to be in production. So I happened to get some production jobs. But what I really wanted to do at that point was write. And I thought this was, the late 90s in New York, mid-late 90s. And I thought, well, when I get out of school, I'd like to write for Conan or Letterman or maybe Saturday Night Live. And so I thought out of a city of, 6 million people, I was like, well, okay, so I'd be interested in 40 different jobs openings that are available. Anything beyond that, I don't think that's not really for me. So I sort of went into it thinking a little bit unrealistically, but this is what, I eventually got back to writing and acting, and sort of that's kind of what my focus is now.
Very interesting that you would have that list, though. Conan O'Brien, very, very similar. He comes out of Harvard, and that's, he was that laser focused as well. And 2 out of the 3 franchises you just mentioned were the 2 that he wanted to work with. And then the third one, of course, is the one he became, which is very interesting. Right. Now, also, you have worked for all 3 franchises, though. It's interesting because, you come out and you have this list. It might not have been in front of the camera, might not have been ready, but you did actually work for all 3 franchises. Was Saturday Night Live first?
No, Conan was first. I was an intern at Conan. And then I came back a couple of times, to drive the truck on remote pieces and do that kind of general PA type stuff.
Yep.
And from there, how I got the Letterman internship first before doing Pet Tricks was the writer's assistant at Conan was a woman named Ruth Sinanian, who was a very sweet person and very friendly and funny. And I would hang around the writers as much as I could.
Yep.
I guess I got it in my head, well, maybe I could go intern at Letterman after this. I know it's super competitive. And she had worked at Letterman, either had worked there or had been an intern, and put in a call and recommended me. And that's how I got the interview there. And so I went from the Conan internship to the Letterman internship. And then SNL was a friend of mine, Will Shepard, was working on the film unit there with Jim Signorelli, who was the guy who directed the SNL fake commercials forever. That he back to the little chocolate donuts with John Belushi,
Oh my gosh.
Had been there, for the whole run of the show. He was working on that film crew. And again, there was just hey, we need guys to lug stuff and go pick up the cube truck and the
Yep.
15 passenger van and whatever. And that was the most I ever did at SNL, but it was enough, everything, at least at NBC at that point. I mean, Dave was at CBS obviously at this point, but
Yep.
Conan was on the 6th floor, SNL was on the 8th floor. And like the two of those shows were, when things were slow at Conan, I would just go down to the Saturday Night Live studio and stand around and watch rehearsals or whatever. And nobody, it was very, I dug up, I was looking through my old stuff, and the state of security has probably changed a little bit since my days.
Mm-hmm.
This is my secure pass for entry to the Letterman building. As you can see, it's you wouldn't be able to duplicate.
There's
something.
no way you could ever create another one of those, a fake one of those.
Pentagon level stuff, I think.
Absolutely.
And I think
is tremendous.
My 30 Rock pass, I'm not even sure it had my name on it. I think it was just like a written on the back of somebody's business card. So point being, you could wander into the building whenever you wanted, and nobody really checked, and you could go and do whatever you wanted. And so I ended up seeing all kinds of, it was always a great day to go down to SNL and see band rehearsals. Or one day I wandered through there, and I think they did end up doing it on the show, but it was John Cleese and Michael Palin doing the parrot sketch.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and I was just kind of standing around and I walking through rehearsal, and I saw them, and I had no idea they were going to be on the show. And so I was there standing 20 feet from a live Monty Python performance.
Wow.
Which at the time, I assume that you're a comedy nerd. Like
absolutely.
Myself, so
absolutely.
Monty Python likely had a very big place in your brain and heart if you're in it.
Very much. And so does Kids in the Hall, and I want to ask you about that too, the Canadian thing. I want to ask you about that because you work with Kev as well, right? But let's talk about that for a second there. What you just described, there's a couple of things that you described there, the other era of being able to just go and hang around places like this also, but again, a bigger theme, and I think it is Conan, but a few people have expressed this sentiment, the idea that they love being surrounded by the hustle and bustle of a television production, the whip crackling electricity of the creative process, and then a llama might walk by, or a guy in a llama suit might walk by. Like it's just that picture is so whimsical to so many. You just mentioned that you were hanging out in 30 Rock, one of the greatest, beacons or symbols of broadcasting ever. When it happened, was there majesty for you? Was there impact? Was there pinch me moments? Was it as magical place as you thought it was going to be?
100%. I mean, it's like, and it still is. I always love that building and that, that little area right there around the skating rink. And it's just, anytime you like that whole sort of square between 49th and 50th and 5th and 6th Avenues, like just it is like you cross the street into that area and it just starts to feel different. And I don't know if it's like the, part of it, I'm sure, is the art, the architecture and like the gold frescoes everywhere. And
probably radioactivity from something as well.
I'm sure.
Just one.
Things that are supposed to be, supposed to have been cleaned up by now, that potential Superfund sites. But it was great. It's like, it's such a, everybody says they don't make them like that anymore, but that building really is it feels like it could be, you were there like in the 40s and 50s, and like when all this stuff was really starting to happen. And very, at that point, not a lot had changed really. I'm sure it's much slicker, and I haven't been back there and certainly not inside the building in a really long time.
Yep.
But it felt like I was so, and especially when you're a kid and like you're kind of just starting your life, and it was like, man, I can't believe I'm here standing like where all these people have stood. And SNL in particular, the walls are lined with photos of all the greats. And it was pretty insane to work there as a kid that age.
That's fantastic. Now you mentioned there's a couple of directions I want to go in. I want to ask the question about the differences between being an intern for late night and with Conan O'Brien and Late Show with David Letterman. I want to ask that, but this Saturday Night Live thing, the idea of going and hanging around and witnessing some of these things, I would like to explore that a little bit more. What are some of the other things that you just kind of hung around and saw? Like that's
trying to think of, that's always my go-to, because that, all
Monty Python, iconic, beyond iconic.
And the parrot sketch out of everything, like it wasn't like they showed up to do, or like it was some sort of post Python thing. They were older, and it was like, I'm not sure what excuse they came up with for why suddenly in the middle of a 1998 or just 97, 96, something like that, Saturday Night Live show. They're like, well, now we're going to do the parrot sketch with two people who many of you probably couldn't identify. Like, no, do people know who Monty Python is at that point? The kids that are watching Saturday Night Live, maybe they do. I guess maybe they do. I did. But I'm trying to think who else I saw there musically. Well, one big one, and then recently it got a little bit tainted, but this was, let's see, what were they doing? This was, I believe, okay. I want to say, all right, I can't remember who the host was, but it was, the musical guest was Jimmy Page. But unfortunately doing a song with Sean Combs. They did a song on
hey, famous and infamous are interesting. Like there's it crackles a little bit differently now, but what a moment to see something like that, to see the fusion of these two iconic artists. And I mean, that's still the case. I mean, famous or infamous, that's still the case, right? That's a crazy moment.
Yeah, the power of a musician like Jimmy Page. Everybody know, of Led Zeppelin for the kids. Look them up. I think they're on Spotify.
Think Greta Von Fleet, but cooler.
Yeah, right. The first one. And it wasn't, the song was basically like, it was the riff from Kashmir, I think, and then he just rapping over it. And so you're just watching this guy play this song you've heard your whole life, and they had like not a full orchestra, but like an orchestra behind it. And it was, there's sometimes you just get that feeling like, what if I just walked into the middle of the stage? Like, nobody would really stop me, I don't think. It would be extremely weird. But there's such an, it goes back to the low security thing, which unfortunately has gone forever, I guess. Or maybe for the best, it's gone forever. But, you just wander around backstage there. You go sit in Lauren's office for people to watch and eat popcorn and watch the show. You stand around at the page desk, and the cast members running back and forth past you. And I think the time when I was there, I want to say, I think it was the first sort of, I don't know what year it would have been, but it was like the Chris Parnell class.
So they had just flipped in Will Ferrell and those people had just flipped in. The Dana Carvey,
it was
crew
post Carvey
had left and moved it over.
Sandler
and all those guys
were still hanging around. Yeah, exactly. It was.
So you were there for the Norm Macdonald years.
Yes. Let's see. Yeah, he was doing, because I was a faxer. They used to call them faxers when you would pitch update jokes.
Ever get any on?
I got one to dress rehearsal, but I can't even remember what it was. But I think it was not even. I'm not even 100% sure it was mine that got to dress rehearsal, because it was a very like first thought kind of joke, and I'm sure half a dozen people faxed it in, and I was like, maybe it wasn't quite my wording, and so it must have been somebody else. But I'm taking credit for it.
Absolutely. Did you just fax for Weekend Update, or did you do it for Late Night Late Show, any of these other ones as well?
I never got around to doing it for those. I submitted packets. I never submitted a packet to Conan.
Yeah.
Although Conan did read I was thinking about this as I was like digging through my old papers and everything. Like, I was 20, let's see. But when I was when I was an intern at Conan, I must have been 19, something like that. By the time I got to Letterman, I was 21.
Yep.
And I really, like I said, I had this mindset like, I'll just go write for, I'll just get one of these easy, readily available late night writing jobs. And so like I put packets together, and people read them. Like Tim Long was the head writer at Letterman when I was there, and Rodney Rothman.
Yeah. And
they both read packets of mine and like were very complimentary. But I wrote a Simpsons spec that Conan actually read for me, and like passed it on to Rich Appel, who was a guy who was a writer. He might even still be there now that I think about it. But I have a lot of embarrassment about it, because basically Letterman, The Simpsons, and Steve Martin were sort of like, that's what sort of formed my sense of humor.
Yep.
And so like, I haven't looked at any of that stuff in years, but I guarantee you that my sensibility in submitting like a Letterman packet was like, yeah, this is all like, you learned all this from us. Like we don't need like people who are just gonna, like you're sort of formed in this crucible, and then most people, me at least, didn't really have like a fully formed comic voice at that point. I was still sort of, mashing together influences and trying to develop something out of it. But I now, looking back on it, I know for a fact that Simpsons spec, I can't remember what they might have been, but I'm 99% positive that there were jokes in there that had been on the show, like where I thought that I thought of them.
Yep.
Like there was something where it was like, oh, this is the perfect Simpsons joke. And then I would be like, later on, I was like, wait a minute. Or I'd see a rerun or something and be like, was that in my script? And I would go back and be like, oh, no wonder it sounded like a great Simpsons joke to me because
Because it was one.
Okay. So I wish, sometimes I wish like, boy, if I'd, been a couple of years more mature than 19 or 21 when I had these chances, like maybe I would have had a little more to offer some of these places, like creatively, like than I did at the time.
But it's interesting though, because there's also the factor, you got a guy like Will Forte, phenomenal creative, phenomenal writer, not necessarily finding the voice of Late Show. And
Yeah.
so there's that part of it too. Like, do you know the voice of the show? And it's been interesting talking to some of the different writers. Beckerman comes up, right away thinking about the idea of the learning curve of being the writer. Are you going to get, stop writing what you think we want you to write and just write,
Yes.
and so there's that. Or Steve Young comes in, and I mean, he wasn't, he's like, who's Calvert DeForest, he knew him as Larry, but he didn't know that much. He was a little bit disconnected from it, right? And his voice just happened to be complimentary to the point of maybe even shaping the voice of Late Show. But then some of these other writers who came in, and that's exactly what you're talking about, they knew the voice like the back of their hand.
Yeah. Well, and some of these, like a guy like Will Forte is like a comic prodigy. Like he may not have been a good fit for Letterman,
Exactly,
but he, like he was sort of fully formed. I think Rodney's another guy like that who, because I think he got hired right out of college, I thought.
Yep.
But a guy who's just like sort of a natural, kind of like knew who he was and adapted his thing for what they needed, and so it can be done. But I just wasn't. I don't think I was in that place. It took me a little while longer to sort of figure out, what I could do that was funny rather than just sort of, imitate things that I thought were funny. But
were you a part of Upright Citizens Brigade at this point?
I had taken courses there. I took them so long ago that I took them with Matt Besser and Amy Poehler.
Wow.
And Armando Diaz, who are like, the founders.
Yeah, I was going to say,
it was
ground level.
Yeah, almost. And that was through the guy, Chris DeLuca was the guy who hired me at Late Night as an intern.
Yep.
Like a great guy, hilarious guy, one of the funniest people I know still. And I remember he had said to me like, hey, we're going to see Upright Citizen Brigade. It's like an improv show. And I was like, oh, improv, like a little corny. I don't think that's for me. And we went to see, they were in this theater. I want to say it was maybe Solo Arts. Was that the name of it? It was like it was like on the 4th or 5th floor of some building. You took like this rickety elevator to get up there. And it was like this crummy little room with a bunch of old theater seats in it. And like not a stage. I think it was just a flat floor.
Yep.
And they did some version of, I can't remember the name of the show. It was like a version of like a sports thing. It wasn't ASCAT, but it was some sort of something like Thunderball or Murder Ball or something that had like a name like that. And I just had never seen anything like it. And I was like, I got to find out more about this. And so I think I signed up for the classes like immediately.
Yep.
And I think Armando was my first teacher. And then Besser after that, who was, he was a great improv teacher because he could kind of tell, I kind of like getting like yelled at a little bit by teachers.
Yep.
I feel like I'm, have some actual aptitude in it, in something. It's like, all right, good. They're care enough to sort of like challenge me on this.
Sure. And well, some people respond very well to authority. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that I do always, but if it's a thing where I really want to get better at, like there were times in that class, he would just say it to people like, why did you do that? Like, and like, not like in sort of a, like, let's explore why you did that, but like more a vibe of like, what were you thinking? Like, why would you bother? Like he literally just like, you're wasting everybody's time. Why? Like he was not, I don't think he was ever that abrupt, but I think he could tell like the people who had some grasp of it. And so, and the people who were there because they had heard there was some like, this was the cool place to be or whatever, I think he didn't have a lot of patience for that, but he was, a very talented guy. And Amy was just like the most sort of supportive, nurturing, like, she, at that time, I have not kept in touch.
Yeah.
But at that time she seemed like very much like the person that you see, that you sort of feel like she is, like a sort of friendly, gentle, easygoing, and just funny as hell. So yeah, so Chris from Late Night introduced me to them, and yeah, it was a great time to be around that whole area in Manhattan. Like there was a lot going on then for sure.
Where were you living? What was your apartment like?
I probably, let's see. Well, I went to school in New York, so I was either in, yeah, let's see. So when I was an intern at Conan, I was in the dorms.
Oh wow.
Um,
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
so that would have been that. And then my friend Will, who I mentioned, who got me at the job at Saturday Night Live, we had an illegal sublet off Columbus Circle that we were in for less than a week before we got caught, and the owner got threatened with being evicted. Like, it was a great apartment, and
I
I was
bet
kind
it
of living
was
in the
off
living
Columbus
room.
Circle.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah, it was
God.
like between 8th and 9th, I think, like 55th, 56th, something like that. And it was like, this is great. This is going to be our base of operations. And like, they caught us immediately. And the guy who we were renting the place from was like, yeah, you guys got to move out. They're gonna evict me. So we were there for like 5 days or something, had to move all our crap out again. Yeah, it was something that's very funny now, but
Yeah.
at the time,
Oh no, at the time. It's a
less
perfect
than
New York
optimal.
story though. It's a perfect New
Yeah,
York
yeah,
story.
for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you're interning for Conan, learning a lot, a sponge. Were you able to keep that excitement up? Was it, what was the mood like working there?
It was a great time to be at Conan.
Yeah.
Like again, I haven't seen him in a very long time, but um, my understanding is that he still is like this, but like he will just talk to you. Like
Yeah.
um, like I don't think he's super wrapped up, and certainly wasn't at the time, in like sort of being the star of a thing.
Yeah.
Um, I think I had gotten there. The way I sort of like remember this is in the little sort of lobby area where all the interns sat. There was a big blow up, and I think it was the first time he had been on the cover of Rolling Stone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a picture of him with like, they had done his hair like way up and put like these little plastic surfers in it, is how I remember the picture. And it was like, I got there sort of right. I think anyone who's watching this probably knows the story of like the early Conan panic years, where
Yeah.
got like at the end of each show, they would find out if they were canceled or not. But by the time I got there, it had kind of evened out, and he was starting to become like a bit of a cultural
Yep.
icon. But it was right at the beginning of that, and so everybody, it was like being in an office full of people like who had just had a stay of execution, and like they're just released. Like, we finally were on solid
A
ground.
bunch of grateful people.
Yeah, and it really was, and people were like that, and Conan was definitely like that, and I think he felt so much responsibility for the show being a success and keeping people employed and everything. And now it was finally like solid ground, finally. And so he seemed, to me at least, to be in a good mood like all the time. He would just come out and like plop down and like talk to the interns and sit around. It
Yeah.
must have been like, I'm trying to think of so the changeover was like 94, is that right? 93, 94, is that
Yeah.
when Dave
Yeah.
CBS?
Yeah.
So this would have
93.
been, so I would have been there like 3 years after that, maybe.
Yep.
And I think, from as far as I can tell, everyone seems to agree that it was like a 2 to 3 year period where it was
Absolutely.
a daily nightmare. And so like, as soon as they got solid footing, then I showed up and I was like, hey, this is great. What a great gig. And everyone's having a good time. And yeah, Chris, the intern, was the intern coordinator, Chris DeLuca, and just the best guy, super funny and easygoing. And like, he made a great environment. Conan did. John Groff was the head writer at that point.
Yeah.
Ruth, I mentioned, the writer's assistant who got me in at Letterman. Just so many great people. And again, like, wander down to the studio, like watch rehearsal, Ben Folds, Screen Day, like
Yeah.
Anybody you could think of, and like
He had such
stand around in
great
the
music.
hallway and
Yeah.
and like, oh, there's Howard Stern, like and like, I grew up in the tri-state area, and so like, right across the hall was the news. And so like, I'd be excited to see like Sue Simmons and like Al Roker, like, like,
Yeah.
hey, people I watched on the news all growing up. And
Sure.
but again, and part of that, the 30 Rock building, that whole vibe, it was
The Live at 5 Letterman connection. I mean, of course, things.
Sure.
You're in college interning for Conan at a time where Conan the Groundswell was there. I go back to I've mentioned this moment from the show multiple times because it serves so well. You got a guy like Dave Rogalski, who was a legendary writer for Late Night. And he came in after the changing of the guard a couple of times. But he came in having been nurtured by late night during his college years, his early college years. And it was when all the kids were watching. Like, he talked about how he would have pictures of celebrities from People magazine and stuff on his wall. And after watching Letterman, they all get torn down, right? Because it changes. You know, they're all sponges there, and if they get sponged up by the Letterman cynicism and whatnot, looking at things, it became, and then that was the groundswell that built late night into the fervor. Was the college kids. You were an intern and going to university when that was happening, when that generation was doing that to Conan O'Brien. And that's a very interesting time that you actually got to intern there and go to university at the same time. That's very interesting.
Yeah, people, you know, it's hard for today's young people to understand, but the notion of the late night wars, and like how much media oxygen that occupied at the time, you know, it would be on like on the news and on like the front page of newspaper, even if it was just the Post or the Daily News or whatever. It's hard to imagine, like, now, you know, all the late night hosts all like go camping together and, you know, post marshmallows or whatever. But it was such a you know, for something that's so silly, it was such a comically high stakes atmosphere.
Yep.
I remember, you know, to me, the best illustration of that, and this, I think this happened when I was there.
Yeah.
At Letterman, Leno had bought the billboard up the street, like 54th and Broadway, #1 in late night, and then Dave, I think it was Rob Burnett's idea, put up the #3 in late night
and
billboard.
bigger, with a bigger grin on his face, with a bigger like it was.
It was like, that was just the greatest example of like, like we made our bones like taking the air out of this whole thing, and we include ourselves in that.
Absolutely, one of the best jokes of all time. We had George Schweitzer, who was the head of CBS marketing for 47 years, on the show, and we asked him about that because, you know, marketing Late Show and the unique relationship with Worldwide Pants and CBS and the arrangement, the very unique arrangement that was there. You know, we want control over everything, and so, but they'd have to run things through like an ad campaign like that. And at first, George
Dave
sees
owns the show, right?
Oh,
that was the whole key to
that's
everything.
right. So George and his team see this idea come across the desk, and at first they were aghast, of course, and then a couple seconds later they immediately get it, and everyone's laughing, and it's like, yes, let's do this. A perfect example of that. Now let's move to so the internship. Same stay at university, basically, or you switch. Conan, the time is up, the candle has to go out, and you just move over to Letterman, and you get another dream come true university experience. Like,
it was. It's
Ben.
I don't know. I've always had a great luck. I mean, with a lot of things in my life, but that kind of thing especially. But you know, really, like at a certain point, the luck is to get in the door the first time, and then to from there, you tend to meet people who are, and certainly in this world, are all like-minded and you know, like and appreciate each other, and you form these relationships. And it's less of like, hey, can you do me a favor and help me get this thing, and more like, oh, you know where you'd be great, you should call so and so. And it's sort of like what you wish all kind of networking was, because you have real relationships with people, and it's not sort of like a transactional, like, hey, we'll meet at a mixer and I'll do this for you and you'll do this for me. So like, it seemed a very natural progression, like, oh, you did a good job here, and it'll like, you'll do a good job there too. Like, I'll call Janice Benito. And so that's really, I was
going to ask if she was in charge at that point when you came over. She would have, because it would have transitioned over right to that, where she was just finding her groove in the interns. And of course, you know, like she looks at all of the interns as her kids. She won't tell me stories specifically when the record button is on about people, because she doesn't want to leave other people out. That's how sweet Janice is.
She was
she doesn't want to play favorites.
Person.
She really cared about the trajectory of the lives of the people who came into her little world.
100%. It was a very, you know, that building, the handful of floors they had, like it was like a little ecosystem, you know, like a little microcosm. It was like a microcosm of an ecosystem, of a model of a, anyway. But it was like
in a test tube, in a lab.
There was a lot of stress, and you know, and a lot of pressure, and in my case, at least, a lot of it I think self-applied. But it was, I'm hard pressed to think of anyone who like I didn't like.
Yeah.
or who I was like, this person. Like there was just sort of a way, like the people that, and people start on that show answering phones and then become executive producer. Like there's a reason why that happens.
Yep.
And so yeah, it was, it was just so making that transition from Conan to Letterman was like, I think also at Letterman, they must have been like, oh, well, this guy is definitely going to understand how a late night show works.
Right.
Like that we're not going to have to, start from scratch.
Yep.
So I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. I'm sure Ruth's recommendation had a lot to do with it. But
did you
again,
do the
like
gamut?
really...
Did you do the gauntlet of going from the different department to different departments?
Yep.
And who do you remember who you connected with? And was there a couple of different ones that you potentially looked at, or did the direction form itself very easily?
Well, I mean, I was so focused on wanting to write at that point that I was just praying that I would be the writer's.
Please get me in the
intern.
writer's floor. Please get me in the writer's
Yeah, exactly.
floor.
I wanted to get on like the Bob Borden track
Yeah,
of like,
yeah.
But I think at the time, I feel like I remember Janice saying, like telling that to Janice, and she was like, try not to be too big about that. Like they're a little wary of I think maybe sometimes people would show up there and, someone who wanted to intern on the show or work on the show and thought it was sort of their ticket to like be on camera or to be. So like to be a writer on that show was like just as sort of at that level, I think.
Yep.
And so she was like, they don't necessarily like, they kind of want you just to be an intern. Like you're not there to kind of be so forward about like what you want to get out of this.
Yep.
And
good note. Good advice.
Yeah, for sure. And so,
Yep.
yeah. And so I ended up, it would be tough to remember who I talked to from each department.
Yeah.
But I ended up, except for Chris Shakai, who was Paul's assistant, was the only sort of one man show there that I remember.
Isn't Chris Shakai one of the greatest humans on the planet? Isn't he just fantastic?
Like, yeah, I think to be, just super friendly and funny and like, very like Midwestern sensibility and like just nice guy and unfazed by what should sort of be kind of like a high pressure situation and always had time to talk and very, very nice, sweet guy. And so, so I ended up in the talent department working for Joanna Jordan. Another,
I adore Joanna Jordan. I love her so much.
And talk about a high pressure job. I mean, like, so I never would have thought to say like, hey, I'd like to be in the talent. I would have thought that, the people who wanted to be like celebrity adjacent would come in and be like, oh, can I work in the talent department? So maybe I can, and that kind of wasn't my, I had people that I was fans of, but that was never kind of my, my scene. But so for whatever reason, I ended up there like, okay, maybe this
I gotta ask a question. I'm sorry. I gotta ask a question at this point. Did you send flowers to anybody who Dave pissed off? You must have.
No, not me personally. I think
would the intern be the one who? All right, no, he said it again last night. Hey, sit on down to the flower shop. Get this.
I think they were. I'm trying to think of what okay, you know what I remember more of is less the people trying to smooth things over with. I think maybe at that point too. I think they had maybe given up a little bit on like coaxing. There are people that they were like, it's too far gone. Like I'm trying to remember who. I'm sure we all know the go-to punchlines, but what I do remember is not just flowers, but Joanna used to send to try and there were people who just didn't really do any talk shows. And she was always trying to get the person who was like, this person won't do it. And so I remember we used to send them lemon trees. Did anybody ever say that? She would send like a potted like lemon tree. I was like, that's such a nice, like sort of thoughtful, could you send them like a thing of flowers or whatever? This is a very unusual. I can see why that would get someone's attention. It's like Joanna was full of little things like that were like, oh, you can see why she's so good at this. Like she's, it's not just schmoozing and chatting up people's reps and publicists and whatever. Like she really, had that kind of knack for how to like make an impression with people in a positive, and especially in a job where, her boss was not similarly inclined. She was especially well suited to sort of smooth things over and also try and build these bridges to people who would not ordinarily be interested.
She, through words and action, has made me feel like $1 million like multiple times. And I mean, that's me who's so far removed, so far, like I can't even imagine how it would be. I talked to her son a little bit, who works for her as well in her
Oh, really?
organization in Central Talent Booking. Yeah, because I mean, what a great story she is too, right?
Mm,
The idea of, hey, I'm sorry, I've got to go out on my own. It's just too big. It's just I have to do it. The Rolodex is
yeah.
just such that I have
I'm
to
too
do
good
it.
at this
Yeah,
to stay to
like
work for
it
one
has
person.
to. And then I'm saying, okay, well, guess what? We'll be your first client. Like, what an amazing story that is.
Yeah.
And to have watched her build into Kimmel the way that she has, the way that Dave had, folks like Jack Rollins and Hal Gurney and some of these people who were around forever, to have Joanna look and kind of pluck Jimmy and help become rocket fuel for the rocket he's become. It's just such a neat.
Yeah.
I really, really appreciate Joanna Jordan a lot.
Yeah,
She's
me too.
just
I mean,
super. She's super.
I expected it would have had to have been her final decision. I don't know how, maybe she didn't get that involved in hiring the interns, but I assume she would have had to sign off on all
Oh,
of us at some point. And so starting from that, and then, like she was just always as busy as she was, and as, stressed and pressured and everything. Like you could really just like talk, she would talk to you, like she would explain stuff to you and tell you stuff about how the show worked, or, it wasn't just like do this, do that, and, get lunch for this one and whatever. And she was the one who asked me to come back. Like after the internship ended,
mm-hmm.
I think I had another, let's see, I was there over the summer, and then I had one more semester of school.
Yep.
And it was like literally the week after I had finished at school, like my phone rang and they were like, we need someone to do Petrix. And I was like, yep, okay, yes. Like don't think about it. I don't care what it involves.
I'm in.
It
It's
was wild.
official, and I get a
Yeah.
check. I get a check
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. It was a check, I think. At the time, I'm lucky that my parents live nearby. Let's put it that way. But it was, I really had no idea what was involved and like what kind of challenge it was going to be. But the fact that they thought of me, and that's all Joanna. Like, she was just so great to me.
So, okay, this is such a beautiful part because, okay, school's finishing. You're trying to figure all this stuff out. Had some great times. Those great times are now done. Trying to actually integrate into the real world. Am I going to get a job in this sect of culture that I love so much? And a week in to that kind of existential crisis, you get a call and it's like, I get to go work for Letterman. And so it was the talent department that actually ultimately hired you. And stupid pet trick coordinator, is that your first job? You're the stupid pet trick coordinator? Is that the
Yeah.
job description?
Yep, that is it. Stupid pet and human trick coordinator.
Stupid pet and human trick coordinator.
Yeah,
Oh
I was
my
there,
gosh.
and the show won the Emmy that year, and so I have an Emmy certificate, and it says pet and human trick coordinator on it.
You have a certificate. Couldn't get the trophy?
Yeah, believe me, I called. I don't remember what the deal was. I was like,
I thought it was
I'm
an
not sure I'm
option
going to get
when you get the
another
certificate,
chance
you
at
could,
this.
yeah, you couldn't have ordered one though. Like, did you have the option to
I
order
wonder. I think I asked, and they were like, I don't know if I independently could have called up. I'm sure I pursued it and must have hit a dead end, but I don't know. Is it too late? Maybe can I call them now?
one? Yeah, let's call the academy. That is insane. So when you got there, did you know the job already because you had interned the department and you kind of knew a little bit about it, or was it a little bit more fish out of water stuff?
I mean, it was a great advantage to having had just been there, just from knowing the people and where everything is and how the schedule and the show and all that stuff. But they were only doing pet tricks maybe once a quarter, or pet and human tricks. They would kind of do them, 3 or 4 times a year. And at that point, that was one of the original, Merrill Marco era segments of.
Absolutely.
So we're, whatever it was, 15 years in at this point.
Yep.
Of having done maybe almost 20 years.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So to say that the well was running dry would be a bit of an understatement. So that ended up being the challenge, was like people would, like I didn't, in other words, so while I was there, this segment was like not really a frequent part of the show.
Yep.
And Susan Schreier, was that her name? Oh,
yep.
No. Okay. The woman who had booked the segment for years before I did it. I think it was Chris Elliott, and then her, and then she did that whole long stretch, and then me. Wow. And so See, there's a pet trick right now. There's a dog sitting right next to me. I thought, good girl. So she so yeah, she didn't work out of the office. She was working independently somewhere.
Yeah.
So I never interacted with her. I didn't know how the segment got put together, but it was a crash course, and they stuck Diana Lewis with me, who was their sort of I would almost say human interest person, but it wasn't just human. She was sort of anything oddball like that was on the show was her find.
Yep.
And she just was one of these people who knew every like interesting, unusual person, had like connections to them, and would just find the most interesting, weird, cool stuff. And so when Susan said that she was done, they said to Diana, like, all right, we're going to get this guy to do it, but you have to make sure he doesn't screw up. So they basically dumped me in her lap. And she just showed me the ropes, and it was, like the sort of the basics of when there was part of it was once you've actually found the person, the mechanics of getting them to New York and getting them on the show. That was the whole thing.
Yeah.
But what she would do to just try and find weirdos, she was like, this is basically how it works, except for people with pets. And like, I think there was probably some overlap, like, with stupid human tricks, at least.
Yeah.
She would like, but the thing that made it tough was you can't have professionals. So people that she knew was like, well, this guy would be great, but he does this for a living, so he's not a regular person with a day job, so he can't do it. They're not going to have it. So it was like, try to apply these things that I do, but you're going to be going out and just talking to civilians and hoping that somebody's weird enough that they taught themselves something, or that they taught their pets something. But so many of the tricks that I saw were people had taught their pets to do something they had seen on the show. And so it was like, well, this is right? Yeah. Can't repeat. And it was like, are you sure this was in 1986? Are you sure we can't do this 12 years later? I don't think people, nope. Can't repeat. No pros, no repeats. That was it.
Did you have an encyclopedic knowledge of the segment and who had been on, what had been on, or were there times where it's like, yep, we got a winner here, and then you go to research and it's like, oh no, we don't have a winner here?
I don't think that ever. I think the things that people tended to do from the show were memorable enough that I would have remembered just seing them on the show.
Gotcha.
And something that was like, oh, this would be good enough to be on the show. But like, there's a thing, the dog getting the beer out of the fridge.
Yep.
Was like, yeah, I know that's been on. I recognize this. I remember
absolutely.
This. So it didn't have to be that encyclopedic, because the stuff that made the cut was memorable enough that you just kind of remembered it.
Okay, so it made the impression where it popped, where you're like, yep, that's the one. Like, it's just, you don't know what you're looking for, but you sure know it when you see it, kind of a thing, immediately.
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it was rare at that point. I mean, it was tough to find things.
So did you go out of the, like, did you go on the road a lot, or was it a lot of videotape, a lot of phone calls, combination of everything? Like, what are we talking? Did you have a travel budget?
Here's what I dug up. I did. I would go on weekends. I would work in the office during the week, and then I would fly to different CBS affiliates on the weekend to hold auditions.
Oh my gosh,
that
is the skill set you learned in this job, from logistics to dealing with people to an eye for talent. Oh my gosh, you got an interesting skill set from this position.
And I found and the other thing too that made it difficult was Dave didn't want I think this was maybe a reaction to, this is my theory, it was a reaction to when Leno would do headlines. Yes. Remember the headlines bit? And it would say, if you've got a headline, we want to hear it. Send it into, and Dave was like, we're not doing that. Like, so I mean, cool. He never said, who knows what he said or didn't say, but
that's a cool attitude though. That's the cool kid's attitude. And that's
we're not asking for help.
Yeah.
We're just going to work harder and do it ourselves.
Yeah. We're going to find it and show it to you rather than,
Right.
Yes.
And so I would beg, like, please, there was an 800 number. I was like, just put the 800 number up just before the credits, please. And they're like, we can't do it. But we wouldn't do it in New York, but some of the local affiliates would put a bumper in that would say, like,
there we go.
And I think it was when we would schedule auditions. So it was like, Dave's coming to town. Like, but they would say, that's guess what? It's you thought you were going to see Dave. It's some college kid that's there, like, with a rental car. And so they would put up a thing that would say, like, there's going to be auditions in your city. Call this 800 number. And so I found this flyer. This was the extent of our marketing budget.
Oh God, you got to scan that and send it to me. Are you kidding me? Here, hold
Yeah.
on.
What if I do
Let's
a
make you
screen
big.
grab?
Let's make you big here for a second so the audience can see
All right.
it.
So this was like, I think I would, email this. I think, yeah, we were doing email at that point, but initially fax it. But to say like, hey, please put this flyer up. I think I sent this to like pet stores, to like, I don't know where else I would have sent it. Anything animal related, I would send this flyer and say, please, can you do it? And there's like a little cover letter, and
Oh, that's
um,
fantastic.
and then they would take out also a little. This was the extent of the marketing budget for newspapers.
Oh my God, a teeny
This is
tiny
what
square.
this is what I was working with. Like, gee, I hope someone sees this in the paper and remembers it. And like, it was tough. We had a marketing budget, and that was all through like CBS would handle that because they would work directly with the affiliates and the local markets.
Right.
They would do newspaper buys and stuff. And the press office was great because when I would come and do the auditions, every like newspaper was there. They would do a nice piece for the local CBS news. Like, I was just looking through. I have like stacks of newspapers from like Cincinnati and Jacksonville and Portland. Like, they got a lot of like great coverage from this. Like the CBS press people were like, they were on top of it. And so it was always really well attended. And there was always like, because it was pet and human tricks, there was always like interesting, weird people doing stuff and things where I was like, this is cool, but like, it's just not quite for the segment. Like, I wish that there was, and I don't know if did I take it? Something, I don't know. One of the Florida stops, I think, had a kid, and his picture was like big in the paper because it was a great visual. He had a bunch of little lizards, salamanders or something like that, lizards like about this long.
Yep.
And he would clip them onto his ears and nostrils, and they would just bite and like hang on his face. And he's just, so the picture of this kid with lizards hanging on his face, I was like, this, like, if I was like a newspaper feature editor, like this would be giant photo on the front page. But for a video kind of thing, like it's there's not like setup and payoff, and so it's just
it's what are you gonna do here? Oh, hold on, it'll take me 2 minutes to
exactly
to kind of set up, and then it'll look
the jig is up after the first one, and then you're waiting for the other ones to come on, and it was like, and the energy goes and so I was like, I've never seen anyone do this. It's hysterical. The image is great. And it was killing me. I was like, I wish you don't know how badly I wish I could put this on the show, but
it's just not quite
going to make the cut. Yeah.
One of the things that I loved about that segment, and I think the one that I'm going to describe here, famous enough that you'd know it, I think it was probably after your time, was when a pet could do a conventional trick in a new way. Like the one that I'm going to, say the play dead one, oh, the dog's going to play dead. And you see Dave almost kind of go, oh, really? And then, play dead. And then the dog goes limp in the guy's arm. It's amazing. It's the most amazing play dead that you've ever seen. And it's got kind of a new spin to it. I don't know if that was yours, but was that one yours? Was that one?
I think that was after me. Yeah.
That was after you. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the idea that you're probably, delighted if you see a dog do a conventional trick with a twist. I'm certain that's something that
was a big thing. Yeah. I mean, you were looking, the twist was everything. And sometimes it was just the visual too. The way that dog just kind of like folded in half over the guy's arm. Like, it was the thing that they always wanted to do was give Dave, I'm not sure Dave ever saw video of the tricks before the show. I think it went up to Maria Pope, and I think she made the final call.
Yep.
And Dave,
and when you were there, Dave was still doing rehearsals too, right? Or would he do rehearsals with the stupid pet tricks, or was that somebody else who would do those?
I don't think he was there for when we would rehearse pet tricks.
Okay,
he was there. Gotcha. I mean, he would do like the daily, like he's at the desk running like, I don't remember what.
Yeah, he was still doing that until after 9/11, I believe, is when when he stopped doing the rehearsal thing. You were there while he was still doing rehearsals, but he wouldn't do rehearsals for stupid pet tricks.
No, and a whole part of the thing, because the best thing was to get Dave's honest reaction to a trick.
Yes.
And so the whole key, and I guess it was Maria that would write these. Maria Pope was a senior segment producer, I think, at that point.
Trying desperately to get her on the show. I adore Maria.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had a nice little moment with her at Rupert's retirement thing, and I got to tell her how much I appreciated her and whatnot. And she, behind the scenes, there have been so many things, as you can imagine, said to me, Ben, about Maria and how much people enjoy her.
I mean, talk about being like in the nerve center of this whole thing. But she would like, so I think she would write these descriptions. And so like, Dave would have the card with the description, but it's not 100% clear from the description what's going to happen. And that was the way those were the big hits. Like, and I went through to kind of refresh my memory, and I remember we had a guy where the intro line was, he's going to give himself a wedgie. And so it's like, this is going to be interesting and funny. Like, so what is the thing? How is it going to work? And he could dislocate his shoulder and put his hand, he took his shirt off so you could see the whole joint popping out. And he would go over behind his back, reach all the way down to his underpants and pull them up out of the back of his pants. And like, that was the perfect prototype of like, Dave's going to know something funny is coming. He's not going to know exactly how it's going to hit.
Yeah.
But it's going to get a huge reaction. He's going to laugh at it legitimately because it's a ridiculous thing to see. So that's what we're always striving for. And there was the one where a good pet version of this was, we had a dog who plays fetch with himself.
Yep.
And so this person had a little like a catapult. And I feel like I've seen this on the internet since, and maybe somebody like makes and sells these now. So this dog would put a tennis ball in this little bucket of this catapult, cock it with his nose, and step on a pedal that would launch the tennis ball, and then he would run and catch it. And so to say like, you wouldn't, Maria was the one who like, you don't write dog operates catapult and he plays fetch with himself, and it's like, well, how is this going to work?
Yeah.
And then the visual plus the surprise of seeing the dog do this like multi-step mechanical thing. And I remember that dog's owner was like, he does this all day. Like, he'll do this, he'll get up and go to the thing, and just like, we won't see him. And so it was so great to, when you could see Dave, his honest reaction to these things, and you knew something was ahead. It was like, yes, we did it. We got one.
There's such a it's so crazy how we haven't really focused an entire episode on stupid pet and stupid human tricks. We've had participants and whatnot on the show here from the segment, but it's really cool deconstructing this with you, Ben. I'm having a great time doing that. To just zoom out just a little bit, this is one of the areas where I think we see some of the alchemy of late night and late show. At the beginning, one of the things that Meryl and other people wanted to do was surprise the host more, because if they surprise the host, the host happens in this case to be one of the best, from the hip reactors on the planet that we've ever seen. But the problem is that the host did not want to be surprised, and that they cut that noise off pretty quick, and so the goal was that he would act surprised, or the reaction would be that good, or there'd be that much spontaneity that you would still get the feeling that they were looking for when it was surprise the host. But here's one of the places where the surprise actually kind of stayed intact, where the balance that was struck was, okay, this segment will be produced well enough that Dave can come in not knowing the exact what's going to happen, so you can get that honest to God reaction that you're talking about here. So I just wanted to make that point, because we've kind of talked about that on the show before, and it's interesting that this is one of those segments where the spontaneity was intact.
Yeah, and you really that's definitely true. And I think we even got a little extra leeway because of the fact that you're dealing with animals. You just don't know what's going to happen. Like one of the greatest, that wasn't mine, but one of the greatest pet tricks of all time is when he bends over to kind of kiss the dog, and the dog lunges and takes to take his nose off. Like, they could have rehearsed all day with him on the stage, and they would never have been prepared for it. And it's funny because they did, like, that to me is so much of, there's not any element of that left anymore. Like, nothing is a surprise. And like, it's been like, you can't complain really, because the people that are doing it now, like, they're all like craftspeople. Like, they are, it's all sort of finely tuned and honed and rehearsed, and like, you can't get mad at that. But there's so little that's allowed to just sort of a weird thing that happens, like, that nobody was ready for. Yeah. And I think there was a much more, as you say, like, as opposed as Dave was to like big surprises, they had plenty on that show. Whether it was he also, like, every Andy Kaufman visit, every Harvey Pekar visit, like, I think it was more like, I think it may have just been him talking about, I don't want to be surprised, but I think he had to know on some level, like, well, I might not like this, but this is going to be memorable. and I will be able to handle it. Like, it's not, he was never he never missed a moment. There was never a moment like that he didn't absolutely cap like perfectly.
Absolutely.
And so, you can see why they kept doing it, even if he protested, like, well, this is too good. Like, you're just going to have to live with it.
For sure. And to go back to the example that you gave, Andy Kaufman would meticulously, even if Dave didn't necessarily see it, but with the writers or with the producers or whatever, would meticulously. And then you had somebody, Crispin Glover, like Crispin Glover, when he did The Kick, right? And he's just like, oh, I just want to be like, I don't know if he actually said this or not, but the scuttlebutt is, he's like, I was trying to be like Andy Kaufman. And the producers were like, at the time, they were like, no, you don't get it. That kind of spontaneity doesn't happen.
I love Andy Kaufman. I've always loved Andy Kaufman, but in anything that I've done creatively, I don't even approach considering doing anything like he did. Like, there are people who are like, it's just not only do I know it, that I wouldn't be good at it, but just like, I have such appreciation for it, but it's like, there's not that many people that can do this. And anyone who tries to do it, it's once in a generation, really, someone can come along. Like, you remember that Joaquin Phoenix tried it,
of course. Yeah.
It was like, it was weird and everything, but everybody, and I'm pretty sure the staff knew at that point, like, or at least maybe just Dave had known, like, he's going to come out and do like a thing. And like, it's just not, I think things are maybe just too tightly controlled, and there's, maybe there's more lawyers now. And so people have to be informed of everything, but there was more when I was there. There was more like there were still moments. I think it was when I don't remember if it was when I was an intern or when I'd come back, but I was there for the Farrah Fawcett show.
We just talked about it not too long ago. Yep.
Yeah. And so that's the thing, I hope I don't know all the ins and outs of that or what she might've been going through at the time or anything, but and it was maybe right after the Madonna interview, the infamous Madonna interview.
That was it was moments like that, those infamous moments that were like that the Drew Barrymore with the Madonna, some of these different moments that happened that were clearly where they brought something to the table that nobody expected.
Well, and with Madonna, like, the Drew Barrymore thing was like, obviously didn't see that coming, and it was like it came from like a sweet place of like a fun, silly thing to do. But then if you're Madonna and you come out and you try and like, and I understand like that's her thing, and she, has her own identity and everything that she's developed and continues to develop over the years. But like,
sure,
David's going to eat your lunch. He's just like, this is not the show to try and top the host. Like it,
exactly.
But it was memorable, but it was you're just as memorable as it's going to be, and people will talk about it. You'll be in the papers, you'll be on the nightly news and everything, but ultimately you're just not going to win that one. Absolutely. Like, this is the wrong guy. And I feel like any of the hosts now would in that position would be equally as, Stephen Colbert could absolutely slice and dice anyone that he wants to.
Yep.
But there's just not that sort of like little bit of edginess.
The closest one that has that edge is Kimmel's the closest one that has the edge with other people around. I mean, your John Olivers and your Bill Maher's and all that. Well, okay, sure. but for Kimmel, I think is the one that emulates the edge. Like, you could tell. I went again. Shout out to Joanna. Thank you very much. I was down in LA in May, and she gave me the gold star treatment at a Kimmel taping. And listening to him have a conversation with, I believe it was Chris Pine that night, to have a conversation about mushrooms and some of these things. Like, you can tell over the years, the less F's he gives, to me, it's made him a much better, he's like, no, I'm going to take time off. I'm going to have a little bit of work-life balance in this thing. You want to keep me, you're going to, that to see that, self-confidence show up. I don't even call it ego. I think it's just self-confidence. He's paid his dues, and he's able to say some of these things that are Dave-esque, I would think. And of course, look who his mentor is.
He's got the Letterman gene deep. Yep. I mean, like, in his bones. But it is confidence, because the idea, like, remember again, during this late night war period, the idea of having a guest host, like, Dave had to have 5 bypasses before anyone else would set foot on that stage.
Yep.
And Kimmel
Never
now is
give
like,
up the chair. That's what Morty said. They were thinking
Yeah,
about Rosie
exactly.
O'Donnell. Were thinking about Rosie O'Donnell as the permanent guest host right around the time you're talking about here, when you were there, just maybe a year or two before. They were talking about Rosie as the permanent guest host, and it was no, not yet. Never give up the chair.
Yeah, but that was the upside of the end, like the late night wars. Like, it was fun and it was good fodder, and fun to have enemies and feuds and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But the upside of it now is that these the hosts now are like, it's just a show. Like, we can have some fun with this. It's okay. I can take some time off. And now these people that someone who's not a white man named James can host a TV show for a night, and maybe someone will recognize that other types of people can do this job. And so
Absolutely.
I can give them this platform without, there's whatever it is. Well, it's more now than ever, I guess, 5, 6, 7 platforms like this, but here's a chance to let some other people shine who are not going to get this look. And it doesn't cost me anything to do that. And like, I'm not fighting for my life. And at the time, what are even television ratings anymore? Like, what are they fighting over? It's 100,000 people one way or another.
Yep.
And so, at the time when Dave moved to CBS, it was, like, he was starting this franchise. It was a big deal. There was a lot
biggest
of
story in entertainment, and all of entertainment. It was the biggest story.
Yeah. So I can see why it's like, I can't screw this up, and I can't take a day off. And it's me, like, it's my name on that giant marquee they paid for.
Yep.
And if I screw this up, it's not going to be because I didn't work hard enough. And so, I feel like he has these guys all mellow with age. Dave certainly has, and
absolutely,
and being a father obviously seems to have mellowed him considerably.
Yep.
But yeah, Jimmy too, and they still, it's like sort of a retired prize fighter, if they got back into the ring, they could probably still win some fights.
Oh yeah.
But they're happy with where they are, and yeah, Kimmel has and it's especially impressive with Kimmel because he works for Disney.
Yep.
Disney, you can't chew gum in the amusement park when you work for Disney. So the fact that he pushes as much as he does and gets away with what he does, it's a testament to his talent and to his value to the company.
But then the moment that he needs to do something for one of the tent poles, he's game. And I mean, he happens to be a comic book fan. So Marvel, he happens to be a Star Wars fan. So the idea that he can, happily, authentically do what Dave always refused to do. Dave set up against, management. Well, Jimmy happens to work for a company who, first off, they let him do whatever he wanted to do to start. So I'm sure there's some gratefulness there. I mean, you think of the beginning of Jimmy Kimmel Live and how different it is now.
Oh yeah. Well, and coming off a radio.
Coming off a radio and the band show.
Yeah.
It's funny. I saw him where I watched the Man Show. I'm up in Canada, and so we get our programming is a little bit different in the order of when we get it compared to the US. Sometimes it's a little bit late, or it's a different it's delayed. So for me, Win Ben Stein's Money was actually where I discovered Jimmy and fell in love with him.
I did too.
I loved Ben, and it was a good hook for a show or whatever, but Jimmy was what kept me coming back to that show. I thought he was incredible. And it was the one-liners. It was the thing that I loved about Dave, the really quick, just rapier like wit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He seems to have it's funny, and I know he's very publicly, maybe not anymore, but there was a time where he was very publicly anti-Leno.
Oh yeah.
But he seems to have melded the sort of team player type stuff of Leno, but he's kind of like a Don Rickles, where he will go and insult Frank Sinatra right to his face.
Yep.
But he gets away with he's in this position where he has the credibility, and so when he does these Disney and ABC events, half the time he's tearing them apart.
Sure.
But they love it.
I thought he was a fantastic Oscar host.
Yeah, and at their upfronts and stuff, and the upfronts where it really, they're in front of the advertisers, where he talks about how crappy the fall schedule is or whatever. Not that there's a fall schedule anymore, but he's taken that sort of team player stuff of Jay and kept the anti-establishment stuff of Dave, and it's sort of the best of both worlds. And
I'm gonna say it's
tightrope.
I'm gonna say it's not Jay. I'm gonna say it's Johnny. I think it's honestly, I think he inherited the reverence for Johnny that Dave did. And Johnny, when you think about upfronts and NBC events and hosting the Oscars things like that, that's all Carson stuff as well. Right. And I listened to, I want to say it might've been on Mars podcast. Jimmy was I'm pretty sure it was that Jimmy was a recent guest, and he talks about Leno still. And I don't know that the feeling that you're talking about that he has towards Jay has mellowed. I think he just is a little bit picky and choosy as to if he's going to open up the door. Like we were a hair away from getting Jimmy here, and it's
Oh,
going to
wow.
happen. I wanted to get him for the 2 year, and it almost happened, but that scheduling wise, it couldn't. But that's one of the, I want to go down that path with him. I don't talk Jay on the show that much,
Mhm.
but except for, you know, the macro of things, and you know, we
Right.
compare, like having Bill Carter on, of course we're going to talk Leno, like
Sure.
but I do want to talk to Jimmy about that, because the idea of Jay, you know, during the late shift 2, not knowing if Jay was going to stay with NBC, so he, you know, kind of befriended Jimmy, and then, oh no, I'm just going to go back and do like and then Jimmy's reaction, how he came out and did an entire show of him, the 10 at 10 segment that he did
Yes.
is one
I
of,
mean,
in my opinion, the greatest moments in any late night franchise
yeah.
moment ever was
Yeah.
that. And I would
Just the
love to
guts
talk
to
about that.
do that
Oh
and to
yeah.
stick with it and to not wink during it, like, oh, it's all a put on. Like, he was, you know, like he has that deep down love for Dave.
Yes.
And so it really is like a personal affront. And so, like, for me, you know, like I grew up on Dave,
Yeah.
and then the whole Jay and Conan thing that happened.
Number
Whereas,
2.
so I got 2 versions of this where I was like, you know, did he do this to my other guy too? Like, oh man. And so, like, you know, by all, you know, we all know Jay, by all accounts, sweet guy, nice guy, like makes phone calls, like reaches out to people and everything. But for whatever reason,
He
like,
protects his stuff though.
yeah, to watch the whole thing sort of replay through the Conan Tonight Show situation was like, and I knew a lot of people on that show that
Of course.
uprooted their lives, moved out here, like,
Yep.
and not like, you know, not all like high level people that could afford to just change their lives, like a lot of, you know, ordinary staffers. And like, man, and the thing that was, maybe it was when, it might have been when Norm was on Letterman, and they were, no, who was it? No, it must have been Conan. It must have been Dave talking to Conan, or at some point Dave was like, or maybe it was just one of his like sort of, you know, off the cuff moments at the top of the show, but just like to say like and that NBC told Jay like, well, you're in 5 years you're leaving whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that time, then being like, can you please stay? Like, there's one kind of person that's like, good, yes, I'll stay and I'll keep doing my thing. And there's another kind of person that's like, oh no, you made your choice, and now I'm going to make you eat it. I'm the top late night guy. I'm getting all the ratings. I'm going to take my audience and go somewhere else.
Yep.
And
you make them eat their lunch or something like that. I think it's with
exactly.
I think it's a phrase that was used, and that was that's exactly
and it was
right.
He had everything. He had all the leverage, and he still wanted, like, it was whatever, you know, in him that's like, maybe we can make it work. Maybe everyone can have everything that they want. And it's, again, like, it was sort of like, didn't have the real, maybe it did, I don't know, the real vitriol of the like ongoing nightly, we got to check the ratings in the morning to see if there's any movement in the, but it was just like a Conan who was the nicest. I mean, people say that Jay is the nice. In my experience, Conan, like, long after I left there, I was able to like call him and go and like hang out and meet with him, asking questions about stuff. And like,
wow,
no, there's no reason for him to, I was only ever, like I said, I worked a little bit of production there, but just an intern. Like, there's no reason on earth for him to ever make any time for a former intern. And I know I'm not the only person. Like, anyone that you talk to, like, everyone that he works with seems to have that kind of relationship with him.
Yep.
And so it's one thing to be like, oh, it's cranky Dave and it's team player Jay, but then it's like, well, wait, he did that to Conan. Conan is like the ultimate, like, you know, I'll do whatever you need me to do. Like, this is his thing, and he wanted this. And so, yeah, I don't know how we got down this pathway.
No, I'm glad, but okay, but you're talking about, in my opinion, like for me, and I sure love a lot of Letterman eras. I mean, there's a lot of you know, my favorite Letterman era of all time was in 09, 010, when Late Shift 2 was happening, and watching Dave every single night, and this is the moment with Jimmy that we're talking about, and all of that stuff. You know, I watch Conan O'Brien Can't Stop, which is the documentary made about when he went on live tour after losing the Tonight Show. I watch that. I don't know, I watch that every at least once a year. I mean, I just, it was a fascinating time.
It is just, you know, and it's so funny that all this tumult, like the late night world at that time was like this tiny little, it's like it was, you know, originally an afterthought of television broadcasting, and it always kind of was. And it's like, why is there this much drama packed into this tiny little, you know, 3-4 guys that this is about? how can it be this insane that there's this much soap opera hiding in closets and like and all this stuff? And so when it's the thing that you like, the segment of entertainment that you identify with the most closely, like it really took on this crazily outsized importance of like, like, does Jay care that I think he did something wrong? Does Dave care that I'm defending it? Like, oh, this guy, random people think that I got screwed over or whatever. Like, why were we so involved?
Well, but then watching Conan's audience mobilize, like the Team Coco movement of that, that was like,
it was beautiful. It was
a viral uprising moment to which now, I mean, you look at the franchise that Conan O'Brien is now and what he has done. And it's funny because, Dave got screwed over. And so he created the franchise that would literally topple the dominance of the Tonight Show. No other franchise ever did it. Okay. Crazy. Walked across the street. Okay. Crazy. Built this amazing, unique, crystallized career that nobody's ever had. And I mean, I always use the Godfather analogy. It's not a matter of who's the king, it's who's the Godfather right now. Johnny was Vito and Dave is Michael. That's the way I kind of look at it. Conan, after getting screwed over, has gone and done the same thing. His massive serious deal that he made, Team Coco and the podcast network and all the things. The travel show's amazing. And I don't know, did you catch him when he was on Fallon a few nights ago when he came back to the Tonight Show? Did you catch that?
No, I didn't see that.
It was crazy because he walked out and he seemed, not just physically, he seemed bigger than the show. And it's a fantastic clip to go back and watch the entirety of, for sure. He seemed to intimidate Jimmy. To me, I thought Jimmy was, and I liked you. I don't dislike Jimmy Fallon. He's a very, very, very talented man. But watching Conan come back was awesome. I hope that Conan is a guest on My Next Guest one day. I hope that would be, to me, that would be like a phenomenal. Right? It does, but then just
now that they're both in a place where they can just speak freely, and it's funny how they ended up, like the podcast gig and those travel shows, like. That's the best, like for Conan, like to me, I don't know how he experienced it or felt it or whatever. And I know that it seems that he just loved every part of the job, being the host of these shows.
Yeah.
But to see him talk to, like the third guest, or like the, he always uses Pauly Shore as his, to his whipping boy. Like, I gotta sit down there and talk to Pauly Shore for 7 minutes.
Yep.
Like anybody can sit and talk to a celebrity. Like when Conan does these travel shows where he's out with regular people, and he doesn't like. He was at a point where they got to a point where Dave, that you might know the whole Rupert bit with the video glass, like Dave couldn't be out in public anymore without a big thing. Conan, just by going to other countries now, like his rapport with people and the speed and the wit, like this is the perfect thing. Like it was like he was wasting his time behind a desk. Like as sort of the captain of this like weird comedy movement that came after Letterman with like Smigel and Dino Stamatopoulos and like all these like sort of real oddballs that found a home in this place. As the captain of that ship, like he created this or brought to the world this kind of style of comedy that wasn't happening anywhere else. So like that in and of itself, Hall of Fame done. But then his personal skill set of connecting with people and being actually like legitimately interested in people and their lives and going up to anybody on any street corner in any foreign country in any language, like this is such a better use of his talent than sitting and talking to Pauly Shore. So as painful as the process might have been, like this to me seems like what he should have been doing all along.
Yeah, and he's chartering something just as unique as what Dave is doing right now. It's so great to see that. I'm so grateful of the generosity with your time here. I do have a couple places I want to bring it back to Stupid Petrix, if that's okay.
Please. Yeah.
So you finish. Okay, so the Stupid Petrix event itself, then there's the preparation for the event itself. I've got questions about both. Let's go to the event itself. Okay, it's Stupid Petrix night. You're on stage for everything, correct? You're there for the whole thing. Is that
I think I'm backstage. Let's see. I guess I would be in the green room. I wouldn't be in the wings because there wasn't a ton of room back there. And sort of the less distractions backstage for the animals, the better. So I think I must have been behind. Did you ever get see this sort of little room the area off the green room backstage at Sullivan?
I have.
So there's like when you come in off the stage door, kind of
Yep.
Off of 53rd Street, not the
Yep.
Office store, but the one kind of further down the block across
Yep.
from Roseland. Like it's tight in there. And like there was always too many people in there and nobody would ever like actually sit in the green room. But I was always trying to kind of find a monitor where I could stand and watch what was going on. But at that point, it was like, I guess like with the segment producers, they might go over notes last minute with the guest or like, don't forget you're going to lead into this story, that story, whatever. Like, there's nothing for me to say to the dogs to be like, don't forget, like, don't fight David, whatever. So like, I don't think there was so much of a need. Once they were booked and they picked the order, I'd be backstage just in case anybody had questions or anything. But the segment itself was just like, it was Biff would bring them out and get them in place and send them out and bring them off. And that was all part of the well-oiled machine. And I think it was just, it could absolutely have happened if I had still been sitting up in the office and nobody would have noticed. But for those show nights, I was like, I'm going down to the stage. I don't care how crowded it is. Like, I'm going to find a monitor to stand by and make sure that this works. Like, I'm kind of crouched in, like, I'm like elbowing Tom Malone, like through the, like, that's how kind of packed in we are through the thing.
But you have an excuse to be there, so damn right you're going to be there.
Yeah, I was like, this is the one night they're not going to yell at me to leave, so I'm going to make the most of it.
That actually brings me up to that next question there. The majority of the time that you actually saw the show being shot, or parts of the show, or on stage level, were parts of the segment. Were there any other times where you did that? Obviously, Dave is infamous for not wanting familiar faces poking around and things like that.
I was never there. I mean, I just made sure to not go there until I knew he was like through and on to the stage. Like, even if I was going to be there for the show, I was like, I'm just going to hang out on the sidewalk until I know, like, until I hear the music, then I know I can go in. I'm trying to think if I was there certainly as an intern, you would go back there to like, run errands for people, or like such and such wants this or that. Can you run up to the bodega and get a thing or whatever? He wants this kind of drink or coffee or whatever. Or wait, can you please bring this up to someone? There's always things, that was sort of more later in the intern period.
Yep.
Because there was, Joanna was the top of the talent department. Then there was a level of sort of talent coordinators that reported to her. That was Leslie Cahill and Celia Converse and Zoe Friedman. And so they would do most of like the kind of hands-on. I mean, Joanna would handle all the real like A-list platinum people, but kind of below that, she can do everything. So, there wasn't, after that second level, the interns didn't really, and it was probably for the best, they didn't send interns backstage too often to interact with, but if it was a sort of a low level request, like go and bring this to someone's dressing room or knock on the door or whatever. But I don't remember having a ton of like celebrity interactions or kind of brushes with the show as it was happening. Like,
what about during rehearsal? Music act?
Yeah.
A music act is coming up or whatever. Any memorable ones that you would go and see?
Oh, I'm trying to think of who I saw down there. That's a tough one. I would, you couldn't really do that as an intern. By the time I was doing Petrix, I probably could have gone down and sat in more rehearsals, but I was always like mid-nervous breakdown because I was like, I need to be on the phone. I can't, because this is the thing. Like, this was this is my job, like hanging in the balance. Like, this is what I got going for me. So if the phone rings and I'm not there because I went down to see Blues Traveler, or that's not good. So I was, when it was tough, because it was, you got to wait for the phone to ring. There's nothing to do except hope the phone rings, hope that somebody's VHS tape shows up and that it's something. Like, you can't, there's no UCB, or there's no like, Second City to go and scout talent. You just have to hope that somebody somewhere taught their dog something and bothered to put it on tape and cared enough about the show and was aware even that there's so many things had to happen for this job to go right, and so much is out of your control that I was just constantly like, I'm screwing this up. Like, it was hard to really, like at Conan, when I was an intern at Conan, it was all like, I'm not going to fire an intern. What's the big deal? Like, I'll go, goof around and do whatever. But when I got to Letterman, I was like, I got to be all business. Like, it was hard to take advantage of too much of like the fun stuff. Because it was a high pressure place to begin with. And everybody handled it well enough, but I was really in my first job out of college. And like, I think I ran myself ragged to a point that I probably didn't need to, but so many people had, gone to the mat for me and recommendations and taken a chance on me. I was like, can't, again, not, if I'm going to let these people down, it's not going to be for lack of effort. Like, I'm going to do whatever I can. So I didn't have so many moments like that at Letterman as I did at Conan SNL.
Oh, first off, did you submit any top tens?
I don't think I ever got around, I must have, because I submitted a packet to them.
But not during the scuttle.
During the
activity of the show. Hey, sometimes they would send a call out to everybody and saying, this is the, do you have anything? That wasn't anything that you ever.
I don't think I ever did. I don't think I ever got a hand on those. They must have just not come through the talent department or something. We were on 11. The writers were on 14.
Yeah,
if I'm remembering right. And so I don't think I ever made it to having a mailbox. I might have had a mailbox, but again, because I was stepping into a job where Susan had not worked in the office, so there was they're like, we got to find a desk for this guy. Like, where do we put him? What do we do? And so it was a real like kind of catch as catch can situation. So I did miss out on that stuff. I remember I guess they did that, and they were at a point where they call him the man who's,
Yep.
It's like now a man who, or from New York, the city where blah blah blah. And I don't think I ever got a chance to pitch on any of those, or even just to. I feel like I would, I don't remember how that exactly worked, but thinking about it now, I feel like if I had gotten one on the show, I would have been over the moon. But then I also would have been like, if one of these pet segments goes wrong and I was busy trying to write a joke for the show, that's not a great look. So I was really obsessed with like, don't screw this up. Like,
okay. So there's a culture, a personality, that many, if not most of the Worldwide Pants family have. And there's some attributes to it. Number one is self-deprecation. It just seems to be something that just
not me. I'm great
to have. Yeah. The other one is I was working myself into a nervous breakdown, and just wanting to do so well, wanting to do well for the show, for Dave, for everything, to not let anybody down. And it seems that so many people had that same feeling. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You found your relationship there. Did you find, is that
that is true?
So you're the guy that's going across the country single, going and able to do that because you don't have a family at home. You're able to travel and kind of have this hyper focus on the show. But then at some point there's a love story that develops, and I'm super curious if you'd be willing to talk about that.
Yeah, sure. I had come, I was like 3 months out of being an intern, and I was, working there. And so I started, I guess, in January. And so the fresh class of interns had just come in. And like I said, to start off with, they couldn't figure out where to put me. And so they're like, would you mind, like, it was called Intern Alley, the little kind of tiny room where they would cram 6 or 8 interns into. And so they're like, would you mind just, setting up an intern? They were like, we understand you're not an intern anymore. We're not going to ask you to do this and that. Although there were certainly times where they would say like, we know you're not an intern anymore, but could you just cover the phones for a minute? Or like,
there's some muscle memory here. Please, we know you can do this. Please do this.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it just has to get done. Can you please just do it? And so they were always great to me about that. They didn't take advantage of that. But I started out stationed in Intern Alley there because there was the only kind of like a sliver of a desk. And so I got to know that class of talent and research interns pretty well. But I didn't, we didn't spend too much time. There's a lot of time to clown around during the day, and
sure,
and get to know people and everything, and just like punctuated by like emergency moments here and there. And so I got to know this group of interns, and but they would kind of go out, because I was living with my parents in Connecticut at that point. So I would be out of there to Grand Central as soon as I could and get on the train and get home and go to bed and come back and do it again. So I was like, yeah, I get friendly. And it was a lot of like, at the end of the, I guess I was only there about 6 months while doing pet tricks. And so I guess my tenure and their tenure might have ended around the same time, around the same like semester or something. At whatever point where it was like, well, hey, so long, keep in touch and whatever. And one of the interns, Samantha Horstmeyer, was like, hey, here's my email. We're in, I had like a nice relationship with everybody, and I said, oh, we'll keep in touch and whatever. And she had she was living in Chicago. And I was talking with a friend of mine about possibly going to Chicago and doing like Second City there. And so I said like, hey, I might end up in Chicago at some point. And she's like, oh, well, here, take my email address. And we exchanged regular addresses too. And I think she mailed me an apartment guide or something, like one of those ones, you know, the free thing you pick up off the street. It's like, hey, here's what the apartments are like. And so we started corresponding over email. You know, once she didn't have to look at me that much, I think I became more appealing. And I was able to over time, like, we built this relationship. And then it was, you know, after a couple months, it was like, hey, are we kind of like, it feels like maybe we're
we're crossing a line of some sort.
Yeah. And she came back to New York. What was I doing? I might have been, yeah, I think maybe this was when I was at SNL, or maybe just floundering at this point. But she was like, oh, I'm coming back to New York to visit some friends. And I was like, oh, well, we should, you know, it was like, to visit you and some friends. And so, you know, she got to town and we spent some time together. And it was like, I after that moved to Boston to work on Dr. Katz. Do you remember that? You ever see that show, Dr. Katz?
I know the show Dr. Katz, absolutely.
I assume you would know. Yeah. So I another job I got through an intern connection, Holly Schlesinger, who I was an intern with at Letterman.
Yep.
And who put a word in for me to work at Dr. Katz. And so I moved to Boston. And at that point, you know, Sam and I were, you know, saying, okay, I guess we're a couple, but you're in Chicago and I'm in New York. And so she said, like, well, maybe I could live in Boston. She had finished school at that point. It was like, maybe I'll try and get a job in Boston. And so I was like, well, you could stay with me while you're looking for a job. And so she flew out to Boston and, you know, like, all right, I'll just stay in your apartment and I'll look around and see if I can find something. And she just didn't leave. That was it. And it was like, well, why do you need another apartment? Like, why don't we just, that was it. And so, yeah.
It doesn't seem fiscally responsible to do that.
Exactly. That was my concern. The numbers really, it just didn't, you know, yeah. And then we got married and we've been married 21 years almost.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And so, yeah, I mean, if I got nothing else out of Letterman, that was a pretty nice bonus.
Both still in the creative endeavors in the show business, you know, or is that just you right now?
Just me. She got a real job. She's a teacher, a special ed teacher. So she does something important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she ended up, she started like trying to work in entertainment, and then she did some stuff in advertising for a while, and that she was like, this is not for me. And at some point she was just like, I think I want to do something, you know, with my life. And she went and got her master's and her teaching certificate. And she's become that teacher that like every parent like continues to email like for the rest of their lives. Like,
she's that teacher.
Yeah, she really is. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's extremely lucky, and yet another way to have found Sam.
So what are you doing now? And what have you done, like, since Letterman? You've done a lot of stuff. I'd like to talk a little bit about that. You've got a pretty cool track record of accomplishments of things that you've done. Let's go through some of the high points and what you're doing now.
It's more like just a continued story of like falling ass backwards into things. And like I was in after I got out of Dr. Katz, I came back to New York and I worked in an internet startup right when like the big internet startup boom was happening, and I got hired at a company through a guy who I had done improv, and a UC guy through UCB was like, we need people. And so I was at this internet startup for a while. I worked.
Wait a second, I'm company. People. I can do this.
Yeah, people. Sure, okay, I can do that. It was some crazy, you know, another one of these places that like change their business plan every couple of months. Like, maybe this is something. So I kind of lived through like, and that place kind of got whittled down until it was like, you know, 4 people in the office. And I was like, maybe it's time to find something else. So another guy who I did comedy with was working at a publishing company, and he brought me in to do like temp work there. And I ended up kind of having a nice career there for a while, or it would have been a nice career if it was something that I wanted to do with my life. But then you know, I was still doing like writing and performing, and, you know,
I was going to ask if you were still doing improv stuff and whatnot. And
we had,
so that performer never left you. That was always there. And that was always something that you nurtured maybe a little bit more at times or whatever, but you still always kept putting,
I did. Like, I started out acting like in high school, like, you know, most people do. But it never occurred to me. And it was fun to do improv, like with friends. And we did the college circuit for a little bit, which was fun and stupid and silly. And, but it was never like, oh, I bet I could make a living at this. It just seemed crazy, especially like living in New York, and it seemed like everything was happening in LA. And
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, this is just for fun. But at a certain point, I was like, I really can't, maybe I should really try this. And people that I had gone to school with had moved out here to LA and were like having like legitimate success, like some like very nice, incredible success. And I was like, well, maybe it can, maybe it can be done. And so I came out here and I thought again, like the people that I knew were writers mostly. So I thought, well, I'll write some scripts and maybe they, and they, to their credit, like they would have got me meetings with managers and things here and there. But it always sort of seemed to hit a wall when it was like, well, this is good, but who are you? Like, why would anybody like, it was just sort of like, this is a good script, but who's, like, do you have someone attached to it? Or you're not a name, you need a name. And I just could never really get over that hump of getting past someone saying, well, I like this, but.
Yeah.
And at that point, another guy had gone to school with Adam Goldberg, who was the people know as the creator of the Goldbergs.
Yeah.
Creator and semi star in a way of the Goldbergs. He had sold a show at that point to Fox, and he said, "Why don't you come just be like an extra on this sitcom?" Like they gave me like 6 episodes or something. They gave him some like tiny little deal that I'm sure that I hope that they're kicking themselves to this day. But he was like, come be an extra. Like it's a long, it's a 12, 13-hour day. I think you get $100 but you're on a set and I'll try and like throw you a line and you can get like a line on TV. And so I did that. And I had one little clip of me saying a line on a network sitcom. And from that, I was able to meet an agent and get an agent who was like, well, I don't really work with people who are new at this. But then she thought about it and she's like, oh, maybe. All right, let's work together. And so the first agent, I lucked into knowing Adam. I lucked into him selling a show. I lucked into getting a line on his show. I lucked into meeting this agent who was like extremely diligent, did not have to work nearly as hard as she worked certainly for someone in my position. And she just started getting me auditions and they were all for shows that I loved and watched. And because I knew these shows so well, I started like booking little parts on them. And I was like, oh, so it turns out it's really easy to be an actor. Like it's hard to be a writer, but they just put you on. Well, that's nothing. Anybody could do that. Yeah. And so I built up like this, sort of resume of being like the bit part guy on the. Yeah. There was always somebody in a uniform, a construction worker, a cop, a park ranger, a security guard. Like, but I had like as long as I was with this agent, I had a really nice run of bookings and stuff. And she's no longer an agent, unfortunately. And so and then we kind of ran into the pandemic and the strikes, and now everything's sort of crazy now.
It's different there now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And so I've I have a couple of small parts in like little indie movies and another sitcom that's coming up with where I got to it's called St. Denis Medical. It's going to be on NBC. And one of the stars is Wendy McClendon Covey, who was my old buddy from Goldbergs. Oh, that was the other end of the story, is that after Adam sold the Goldbergs, which is massive, catastrophic runaway hit, he was like, okay, now I can put you on a show with some regularity. And so he would have me on for a bunch of things. I was one of the sort of, oddballs in their neighborhood that would show up and smart mouth Jeff Garland or whoever. And so, I
that looks like it was a fun set to work on. If Kevin Smith's willing to go and direct a couple episodes, like it's got to be a good crew. It's got to be a good, it looks like the production of that was a lot of fun.
Again, like it's part of it is my crazy luck, I think. And part of it, I think, is that Adam Goldberg happens to be one of like the planet's nicest people. And another guy who, as far as I can tell, seems like impervious to stress. Like there were things on that show, like where I know he got put through the ringer for all kinds of different reasons. And he was just never not smiling or like anytime I saw him, he was like, hey, It was like it just didn't seem to affect him. And I think that like you established that at the top, and all the way down people are like, oh, it's cool, like we can enjoy ourselves, we can like this job and have fun and be nice to people. And like I've been on sets where like the person who you're doing the scene with is like, oh yeah, hey. And then I've been on sets where the biggest star on the show is like, hey, do you want to run lines? Like if you want to come to my trailer, I can do your scene with you. And like people like, massive people like Patricia Heaton I worked with, and Andre Brower, rest in peace. Like people who I like were like massive talents and massive celebrities, and were like as humble as you could want them to be. and those have been the vast majority of my experiences. And then, you know, every once in a while you get a dud, but
which makes a notable story, or that's you know, you mentioned the apartment hijinks, so that's very New York. What you're describing now, that's very showbiz, and to have that element of it as well, but it not being the overwhelming majority of the experience.
yeah, it's
It's kind of
shocking.
fun. That's a little bit of color. That's actually not a bad thing when you
One of
consider the rest of it is good.
Yeah, for sure. Like what I don't know why I left him off. One of the nicest, friendliest, most easygoing people I ever worked with was Matt LeBlanc,
Oh,
who
that's
was
cool.
I worked with him on he did the show Episodes that was after
Yep.
Friends.
Yep.
I was like, if anyone has like earned the right to be a jerk, it's like these 6 people that have created this global
Yeah.
phenomenon and generated God knows how much money for people.
Yeah.
And it was like an overnight shoot, and he was just like sitting there like shooting the breeze, like. And it's sort of like when someone at that level can be that sort of, you know, who cares? This is just a job where you're having fun. Like it really sort of, it's a great lesson for someone like a day player to learn, like, oh, like it's not all like backstabbing, and people like, it doesn't have to be like that. Like people that have the most pressure on them are perfectly capable of being friendly and welcoming and normal. Wendy McClendon is another great example of that, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been again super lucky in that aspect. But now that it's, you know, that things are sort of weird in television, you know, I have a couple of scripts that I've written, that I'm, you know, a couple of TV scripts, and then I'm working on a movie now. It's been a very long time since I've written a movie script, and so I'm kind of slogging through it. But like by virtue of these other little parts I've had in sort of indie movies, I know like, well, I could call this guy and ask him to read the script, and so there's been more of an impetus to like, yeah, you should probably, you know, this is a good idea. You should probably just get your act together and write it. So
Get it out.
that's what
Get
I've
it
been
out
trying
of
to
you.
do now.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like this would be like, you know, this would be a great thing. It would be very easy and cheap to shoot. Like these guys, they do great work. Like you see, you know, it's amazing what, because I've been on like indie film sets like my whole life here and
Yep.
there.
Yep.
Man, it used to be really hard, and it's still hard, but like so much just the technology of it has, like I went to
Collapsed
a
time
screening.
frames and simplified things.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I saw a screening the other night of a movie that I had a little bit part in, and I was like, I can't believe how good this looks. Like it was everybody, like when we were shooting, it was like a dozen people, maybe.
Yeah.
And it was like, this looks just like any other Hollywood film. Like there's no like, it's no more like grainy, shaky camera, like soft focus, you know, like the sort of old school indie, you know, the Robert Rodriguez days or the early Kevin Smith days. Like, these people are making like, you know, like Hollywood feature quality films. And so that's kind of like, I'm like, oh, maybe I should try and do that. Like I've always loved, TV's always been my favorite, but it kind of working on these sets kind of opened my eyes a little bit. Like maybe there's something there too. But I also have a a sitcom pilot that was a germ of an idea that was from Late Show.
Yeah.
Because I was the at the time when I started there doing Petrix, I was the only male in the talent department.
Oh, no kidding.
So yeah, and so I at the time I remember thinking like, that's fun, a little bit of an inverted dynamic from like, that'd make a good TV show. And then like the thing I always say is like, unfortunately, like they were all too good to me, and so I didn't really have any fodder for like there was no conflict. Like everybody treated me too well, so I didn't have anything to write about. And so I was like, all right, I guess I have to sort of fictionalize, like this is going to be a guy who works on a TV show for all women and they torture him, and that's
absolutely. Oh, it's
not
fantastic.
like, oh, nobody wants to see a show about somebody who's like grateful for getting an opportunity and who is like nurtured and respected, and like, it's not that funny. So you know,
what's the title of the project so far? What's the title of it?
That one's called Our Turn.
Our Turn. Sort of, I like it.
Yeah. The idea is that it's sort of like a show like The View.
Yeah.
And they are the premise is that they're taken over by like sort of a, you know, global mega corporation, and that's run by a right winger who now wants to force a male onto the show to prove a point about reverse discrimination. And so the guy doesn't want to be on the show. The women that run the show don't want him there. And they're both, it's out of their control because there's this sort of, you know, a looming someone with a political axe to grind that is
Yeah,
forcing
so I
all.
was going to say, is that also, I assume that there's some sort of a rivalry between the stars of the show and the network as well, similar to, like, is there that tension that
Yeah,
exists as
well, it's
well? Because they're
the
trying to tell them to say things they don't want to say,
yeah, pretty
to
much
put
they're
you
saying
in
like,
there as
like
well.
it's
That's a
yeah,
little
the
bit
idea is that
Letterman-esque as well, right?
right, exactly. They're sort of the star and executive producer of the show is, like has earned, she's earned her place to do whatever she wants, and yet because of this, corporate consolidation, now she's not in control of her own show
Now
anymore.
she's working for GE. There it
Yeah,
is.
pretty much, exactly. She's gonna go try. I don't know. Maybe I'll put a scene where she brings him a fruit basket and
That
they
would be
shove her
really funny. That would be great. I'm
do a
so glad
GE
that you get
handshake.
to still flex the creative muscle, and you found such a neat path. And I certainly want to keep in touch and whatnot. Did you know?
Yeah,
I got
for
to say
sure.
this before we finish. Did you know Nick Pruer? Did you ever know Nick Pruer?
You know what? I know the name. I
Oh
don't
man.
think.
Okay, so
Refresh my memory.
I'm gonna give you a gift because Nick was on the show, was a researcher and for a few years, and he has since then gone on with his partner Joe, his comedy partner Joe, to create the Found Footage Festival.
Oh, great. Oh,
And
maybe that's where I know it from. I know
okay,
found
that's
footage.
probably
Yeah,
where you know
sure.
him from. And so he was a Letterman guy. Now you talk about these lost Andy Kaufman-esque type characters. Nick is one. He's one of the best follows on social media you'll ever get. But also
Okay.
he and Joe were featured in a documentary called Chop and Steal, because they would take the Found Footage Festival on the road, and they would go and do all these morning news shows, and it would get fairly monotonous. But then they kind of found a hole where it's like, wait a second, we can get ourselves booked on these news shows, and they would do it as pranks.
Oh, yeah.
They would
Like a
bring
Mark
on
Roach, Yo-Yo Man.
they are the guys who made the Yo-Yo Man. They're the guys
Oh, they
who
were involved with. It's the same thing.
they
Wow,
booked him. They booked him and did all that.
that's
So
crazy.
yeah, you want to watch Chop and Steal for sure.
Okay, yeah,
Nick
for
did
sure.
appear on our show a few episodes back, but I mean, he will go and he creates these fake um magazine covers, and he
Uh-huh.
puts these magazines in waiting rooms in New York, and he does
That's
the
awesome.
most amazing things, and what he and Joe are doing with the Found Footage Festival. But yeah, the spirit of Andy Kaufman is alive and well from those of us who were raised
That's
on
great.
Letterman and the antics on Letterman, and Nick is a shining example of that. I'll definitely
Please
connect you to
do.
his
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah,
It's tough to
absolutely.
do that now with people. Everyone's so cynical and savvy, and if you can
Oh,
do it now, you're really doing something.
and they, like, to the point where, and I mean, Chop and Steal, everyone should watch Chop and Steal, to
Mm,
the point where they ended up on AGT, and there's a like it got really big. They got sued by Gray Media because of the things. Like, this is like, it is a phenomenal story. It's
that's amazing.
fantastic. Yeah, what he and Joe have
Oh, I
done.
love it.
Ben, thank you so much for being so generous with your time here today. This
My
has been a lot
pleasure.
of fun. We've been talking about the idea of getting an intern reunion, and kind of doing the Brady Bunch Zoom screen and having a whole bunch of the interns. I mean, because I know there's still the chats that are there. There's the Facebook group things. There's a bunch of you that are still in connection with each other. I certainly want to help facilitate that. We've got a few ideas of multi guest episodes coming up, and the interns one is certainly one that we want to do. So I assume we can count you in on that one.
Yeah, keep me in the loop for sure. For anyone that hasn't had enough of me, I can only
Yeah.
imagine who was like, no. What's left to say, really?
The good news
Uh,
is I care not about what anybody says when it comes to that. These stories are epic, and really, at the end of the day, we're a celebration of the greatest body of broadcast work in history, that of David Letterman and Company. The company and this behind the scenes stories with the company, as far as I'm concerned, are endless. It is an absolute pleasure keeping this going. I gotta
yeah.
finish. I gotta finish the same way that because we didn't start with it. And I'm just hoping that you have one. We have one sponsor only at the Letterman podcast, and that is hello-deli.com. So Rupert may not
Oh,
own the deli anymore, but he still owns hello-deli.com, the only place that you can get official Late Show with David Letterman merchandise. Dave gave him the
nice.
license. How cool was that? Late Show
That's all. I didn't
mugs
know
and
that. That's
shirts.
great.
Yeah,
Oh,
there you
I
go.
love Rupert.
Isn't okay.
What
So
a guy.
Rupert, good friend of mine as well. I just
Rupert and
adore
May
him
missed
very,
him.
very, very
Yeah.
much. He and May. Any Rupert stories to kind of finish us off here as
Just
we
that I would every morning go in there to get a bagel, and um, there's a guy. Well, maybe you know the guy. Do you know the name Brian Tita?
of course.
Yeah.
We're gonna get
He
him.
was in my intern class.
He's coming on. Oh, Brian was in your intern class. You're kidding.
Yep. He
Oh,
talk about a guy who ran with it. I mean,
oh
boy,
my
that's
gosh.
a nice little career he's put together for himself.
Absolutely. We go back and
But
forth. He is coming on the show. He just don't know when. He is coming on the show though.
I can
and
only imagine. I mean, like
his life is
yeah. But the thing that I always remember at the time was that he was dead set on getting a sandwich named after himself in the deli, and I think
he did it.
I think Rupert. I think it eventually came to pass, but I think Rupert sort of put him through the paces. Like he's like, nah, that's not a good sandwich, or that, like he was really like sort of. I think messing with him a little bit, like Rupert, the sweetest guy and everything, but probably having a little bit of fun with Brian, like who as wanted to make the sandwich board even as an intern.
Amazing.
To be like the Dave, the Paul Schaefer, the Brian Tita. So that was always my favorite thing about Rupert. And and I think Rupert ultimately obliged him because he's Rupert. Because
yep,
he's sweet.
It did happen. It was I believe he made the final. I believe Ted might have still been on the final menu board. Or I've got pictures of the menu board with his sandwich on it. He might have been on the final one.
Wow.
Yeah,
I think he was down to things like where it was like I would never eat this, but it was like I'm getting on that board. I don't care what I have to do. And it's like I admire that. That's an admirable goal. Good for you.
That's what Kellison said. The greatest career or achievement as a career was getting a sandwich named after him.
I'm telling you,
yeah. Oh no, those bragging rights.
Yeah.
The night at the reunion, there were measuring contests. People talking about that, and one of the longtime executive producers, she went up and said, "You never did." Like there was almost like a little bit of a, "You never did." Name a sandwich after me. I asked and asked and asked and asked and asked, and it was just that was a
just hand them out. That's for sure.
Yeah, that was just a fun little part of the culture of the folks who worked at Late Show. Ben, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this. I'm going to do a real quick outro, and we'll say our goodbye privately if that's all right.
You got it.
All right. So
thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you coming on here. That's why we do the show. It's been a lot of fun. Oh, good. I'm so glad. This is why we do the show. It's these little stories, these behind the curtain, around the corner, under the stairs stories that we don't necessarily hear all the time. But those of us who are enthusiasts of what we consider to be the greatest body of broadcast work in history, that of David Letterman and company, it turns a little bit of black and white into a little bit of color. And that's what I hope we did during this episode of the Letterman podcast. Again, go to hello-deli.com, get yourself some Letterman swag. This has been another episode of the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.